Well, good morning, all. I am welcome to our Disability Awareness and Etiquette training. My name is Debbie Malone, and I will be your instructor, trainer, whatever you want to call me for today. I am a disability inclusion expert. I'm going to be talking a lot about this. Today we're going to talk about actually disabilities and inclusion. But for right now, I want to just describe a little bit about myself. I am a disability inclusion expert. I'm actually going to shut off my video just so I can share my screen with you, and then I can talk about what we have to talk about today. We have quite a few things that I'd like to accomplish today, so that to help people with inclusion, disability, all of that sort of stuff. Alrighty, there we go. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I am a person with a disability myself. I want to get that, let people know that this is something that's a passion of mine, to help people who don't understand disabilities and inclusion and etiquette and all of that, to help people learn and be aware of what's going on. So I have been training agencies and companies, different volunteers, paid staff for over 15 years now. I've done things like, training police cadets, election workers, church ministry staff, a lot of different types of groups of people I've trained, basically about disability, just being aware of different types of disabilities, being aware of the proper way to approach people, talk to people, that type of a thing. I've been doing it for quite a long time. My purpose is to help agencies and organizations, churches, whatever, to welcome people with disabilities and to make the atmosphere as accessible as possible. I'm an author. I've got 3 books. It's an Unlikely Dancer series. So the first of the book talked about my own experiences as a person with a disability being hit by a car and what happens with all of that recovery. Types of things I've talked about in my book is things that I learned as a person with a disability regarding accessibility, regarding inclusion, regarding just basically humane treatment and what kind of things I went through that maybe will help you or whoever reads the book to be more aware and to know that things are okay. Things can be okay. The second book is I still named it an Unlikely Dancer because it goes along the same thing of accessibility and inclusion and etiquette. And in the whole book is an instruction book, so basically to talk about the different things to consider with regard to inclusion of people with disability. And the third one is a workbook to go along with the second. The problem I found that businesses want to be inclusive, but they don't know how. That would be any kind of a business, any kind of an organization, nonprofit, churches. People don't know how to be inclusive. Their fear stops them from interactions. They think they're going to do or say something wrong, so they do nothing. People with disabilities feel not welcome because people don't know how to treat them. So they don't return. They don't buy your product. They don't return to church. They don't participate in activities at an agency. So the solution is education. This is the first part of it, is what we're going to be doing in the next few days, and also assessments and plans. So we will go in and we will assess the situation. Let's say I go into an office and they're like, okay, we want to be inclusive. We want to find out what we need to do. I'll do an assessment about all the different kinds of areas, kind of figure out what's going on, see if there's ways we can improve the inclusion. And the result is that many customers that I've had have experienced in much better customer service in general. The company's morale is increased, and ultimately profits will increase, because if you've got more people coming and being welcome and wanting to continually buy from your brand, then you will increase your profits. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, in what I've done, and just to kind of let you know who I am and who is teaching you these lessons today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is disabilities and inclusion. That's our first session today. Tomorrow we'll talk about barriers in language, and the next day we'll talk about disability etiquette. So disabilities, there are so many different disabilities. There's so many different types of disabilities that we are going to talk about. There's a lot. A disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And this is the definition that is on the ADA website, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is the one that's used most prevalent across, all fields, but it may change depending upon the field that people are concentrating on with a different view of disability, but this is a good general definition that we can work from. So there's so many different types of disabilities, and there's different ways to categorize them. This is my way. It's not the only way. It just happens to be the one that I feel is, it includes a lot, but not being too complicated. So let's talk about each of these types of disabilities. First, we have physical disability, which is, it takes on many forms. Physical disabilities can be physiological function, mobility, anything physical that hinders a person from some kind of a major life activity, like walking. That's just one example for physical. Visual disabilities would be somebody who is legally blind, or someone's totally blind. And I'll just talk about myself just because I am legally blind. I have a fair amount of sight, that I think I have a fair amount of sight, but a visual disability is people with who are legally blind have about 10% of what most people can see. So, and only 10% of people who are blind are actually blind. Most are visually impaired. So that's something to consider when you're speaking about visually impaired or blind people. Very few are actually totally blind. Okay, hearing disabilities, it's deaf and hard of hearing. Mental health disabilities, that takes on many forms, and they're actually, most of the time, the disability is a hidden disability. So you wouldn't necessarily know someone has a mental health issue. And mental health issues, people can, they'll take medicine, they have coping mechanisms, whatever, but that is a real disability. And some people, have a hard time understanding that. But if you had a mental health disability, it's just one of those types of disabilities that we wanted to talk about, just to consider that when we're talking about types of disability, that's one to consider. The next one we have is intellectual disabilities. That would be people who are unable to learn at the same level as everybody else. Be someone who has Down syndrome, or just different type of intellectual disabilities. And a learning disability is different, because a learning disability, these people have a capability of learning, they just learn differently. They use different methods, different ways to learn. So this is the synopsis of just a few different types of disabilities to consider as we're going through our process of being inclusive. So we want to make sure that we don't focus on just one type of disability. We try to focus on all the different types of disabilities, and realizing that some can be seen and some are unseen. We want to make sure that we consider those who are unseen as well, because sometimes that gets ignored because people don't always understand that. So some facts about disabilities. 1 in 4 people, about 25.6% actually, according to the CDC, the Center for Disease and Prevention, says that 25.6% nationally of adults have people with disabilities. So, and then in the state of Florida, where I live, it's even higher. It is 28.1%, because we have a lot of elderly people. So just to consider that fact, because if you're in a group of people and you think about, you're in a convention, you're even in a classroom, you're even in your office, and you've got 20 people in your office. So every fourth person potentially could have a disability. So this is just something to consider, how frequently and often disabilities are actually people who have disabilities actually in the community functioning, and just to keep that in mind. And then we were talking about families. 2 in 7 families have a member with a disability. And that's a pretty great amount. If you think about your neighborhood and count how many houses are in your neighborhood. And okay, of those houses, every 7, there's 2 families of someone with a disability. So it helps you to think about how frequent and how many people have a disability that you may not even realize. People with disabilities are like anybody else. They have goals and dreams and aspirations, and they want to be loved. They want to be, do things with their lives, just like everybody else. So just want to consider that, when we're talking about people with disabilities. All right. So this particular graphic, I thought it's got these cartoons, and one person, you can kind of tell there's a person with a wheelchair, but we don't know just by looking whether that person is a child or an adult. And then we don't know what the other disabilities may be in this little cartoon. We've got some short people, some tall people, and then we don't know if they're adults or children. And so we don't really want to know. We want to use this to think about. Don't think about who it might be a disability. You just don't know. You just keep an open mind when it comes to people, because you don't know who may have a disability and who may not, just by looks alone. Okay, so now we are going to talk about inclusion. Okay, now inclusion itself, what is it? I'm saying, okay, what is it really? Conclusion is making sure that everybody has the same opportunity to participate in every aspect of life to the best of their abilities and desires. So that means this definition comes from the CDC. So thinking about that definition, let's see what that might look like. So inclusion involves, first of all, a feeling of belonging. You go into a place and let's say you just started a new job. Go in there, you're like, okay, I'm the new person. I'm just kind of out there somewhere. I don't have any people I can connect with. So you are not part of the group. You don't have that feeling of belonging to the group. You don't have that whole, you kind of feel kind of left out. So this is what people with disabilities feel like a lot. So what we want to do is we want to promote that feeling of belonging in the best way that we can do that. So I have a quote about belonging. Inclusion refers to cultural and environmental feeling of belonging. People in inclusive environments feel appreciated for the unique characteristics and therefore comfortable sharing their ideas and other aspects of their true and authentic self. And that quote came from Requirements of a Diverse and Inclusive Culture. It's a reference that I have. So that kind of tells us that whole feeling, when you walk in that office, you don't feel you belong. Over time, you develop that feeling. You get to know people. Your views are valued. Your work is valued. And eventually you get that feeling of, I'm really part of this. I really belong here. So that you can kind of see that's where we're heading. People with disabilities don't have that in a lot of different places, even after a long period of time. So what we want to do is promote that sort of helping people get to that feeling of belonging in whatever atmosphere we're in. The next part is people with disabilities want, inclusion involves being members of a community. So that means participating in community activities, government meetings, volunteering at agencies in the neighborhood, going shopping, going to the movies, going to restaurants. That whole being out and about and involved with each other is part of inclusion. And then participating in recreational activities, going and having fun together. That's all part of inclusion. That would be you doing outdoor activities, going to gyms, going to sports events, festivals, libraries, clubs, going dancing, just generally having fun together, and having recreational stuff, not always worrying about work. That's important. We have to worry about all aspects of the person to feel inclusion. And the next part, what about working? Since we've touched on that, inclusion involves working at jobs and getting competitive wage. So you go into we'll use the job example again. You're going into a job, you're assuming you're getting a competitive wage for the job you're going to be doing. And after a while, you get to do what you know you were hired to do. You get to feel more belonging. You get to participate in the different activities of the job. You know that that job is for you. You know you're getting a wage that you can hopefully live on. And it's not like you're getting a piddly few cents on a dollar. You're getting a regular wage like everybody else. Inclusion involves people having careers, using their capabilities to the fullest. The same example we have. You have a job. Hopefully that's going to help you in your career go further and further. You're going to be using your capabilities to your fullest. And then having education. So you already had an education. You went to school, you went to college, whatever you did to get that education to get that job. So now I want to think about people with disabilities. They don't have those same sort of inclusion or jobs. And if you are somebody with a disability, you may have experienced times when you did not feel included. This whole inclusion atmosphere was not there for you. You weren't able to feel like you belonged. You weren't able to get a competitive wage. You weren't able to get a job or an interview simply because you need to do things differently than other people. Your careers are not where you would hope they would be. Your education, a lot of people with disabilities, they go to college and things aren't accessible. They can't learn. They don't get the materials the same time the other class members do. They don't take tests the same way. There's things that are different. So what we want to do is find an environment that's going to be inclusive of everybody. Everybody feels like they can participate like everybody else and have the same opportunities and the same chance. So this is what we want to do from here. This is where we go from here. We have to think about creating an inclusive environment doesn't just happen. You have to be intentional in doing it. It's not accidental. You have to go in there and say, look, I'm the CEO of this company. We don't have hardly anybody with disability here. How am I going to include more people with disabilities in this? Well, okay, you have to know that. Okay, let's say this is what we want. So you write a vision. Talked about a vision and goals in this particular slide as well. You want to write, okay, this is where we want to be, but how do we get there? You're going to have goals, but first you need to have an assessment. You got to be aware of where you're at so you know where you're going. So you're going to need assessments. You're going to need awareness and training. You're going to need to get all those basic things first. Have a training like we're doing now. Have somebody come in like myself, do an assessment of the processes and programs in the building and see, okay, this is where we are. How do we get to this inclusive environment? Then what we do is we come up with a plan. Come up with your vision, come up with a plan, and we come up with goals and we work towards it. So that there's a way, if you're not involved in an inclusive environment, you can get there. Inclusion is a journey, not a simple checklist. Just as I described, we go in there, we do the assessment, then we make goals and plans on how we're going to get there. It's not going to say, okay, dun, dun, dun. Yes, we'll have goals, but it's not like a checklist. Like, okay, if we do this, we're inclusive. If we do this, no. It's a whole idea. It's changing the atmosphere, but not just the physical atmosphere, but attitudes and other things as well, which we will talk more about. So now if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is debbie.malone@inclusioneducation.com. We went through a lot very quickly today. I want to make sure that, if you didn't get it or if there's something that's not clear to you, please feel free to reach out. We'll work together on getting whatever solutions that you need. Thank you for attending this first session. I look forward to seeing you at our session number 2, where we talk about disability awareness and etiquette. In session number 2, we're going to talk about barriers and language. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, and you have a wonderful day.